My name is Elaine Whitaker. I'm 60 years old and administrative manager at a mid-sized architecture firm in Eugene, Oregon. I've been divorced for nearly 2 decades, raised 2 children on my own, and spent most of my adult life making things easier for everyone but myself. That morning, I just wanted to enjoy my coffee in peace. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the neighbor's landscaper was running the leaf blower again, the same way he always did on Tuesdays, right as the sun cracked through the kitchen blinds. I had just finished replying to a vendor invoice when I saw the new email pop up, the subject line sharp and sterile, about the wedding. It was from my daughter Lydia. I don't know what I expected, maybe another update on the florist or the seating chart for the ceremony in Provence. But certainly not this. After careful thought and consideration, we've decided it would be best if you attended the wedding virtually. No, hi mom, no warmth, no apology. Just, we've decided. She and Luke. Or maybe just Luke's mother, who never liked that Lydia was raised by a single mom working long hours in a middle-class American job, as she once so kindly put it. They wanted to keep the ceremony intimate, she wrote. His family had concerns about energy, about dynamics, as if I were an unpredictable weather system, as if my presence would spoil the light. She ended the message with a sentence I'll never forget. You'll be able to enjoy the ceremony from the comfort of your home. The link will be password protected, of course. A live stream. Like I was some distant cousin. Like I hadn't paid $28,000 for this damn wedding already. I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I just stared out the kitchen window at the bird feeder Lydia had made when she was 10, watching a finch land, and then flit away. Then I picked up my phone, opened my banking app, and tapped into the scheduled payments. There it was. $45,000 more set to be wired by Friday. I hit cancel. Then I closed my laptop, stood up, and poured my coffee into the sink. The phone began to ring 5 minutes later. Her name lit up on the screen again and again, but I never picked up. Because in that moment, I knew exactly what to do next. The following morning, I walked into Crescent Bank just after 9. The teller smiled when she saw me, called me by name, and offered a warm good morning, like nothing in my world had shifted overnight. Carlos, the branch manager, had handled my accounts for years. When he invited me into his office, I sat without ceremony and folded my hands in my lap. I need to cancel a scheduled wire transfer, I said. He clicked through a few screens, brow furrowing. The one for the international payment. I nodded. That's a sizable transaction. May I ask if everything's all right? I held his gaze. I changed my mind. That money no longer serves the purpose it was meant for. He hesitated, as if trying to decide whether to ask more. But he nodded. It hasn't cleared yet. You're just in time. I exhaled slowly. Good. When I stepped back outside, the April sky was still soft with Oregon mist. I walked to my car in silence, only aware of the rhythm of my own breathing. There was no shaking, no second guessing. The clarity had set in cold and firm like steel. By noon, Lydia had called 6 times. By 2, the number had climbed to 10. I ignored everyone. At 3:12, a voicemail came through. I only listened to the first few seconds. Mom, what are you doing? You can't just, I deleted it. There was something surreal about how normal the day looked. Children biked past on sidewalks. The receptionist at work asked if I wanted my usual coffee. I said yes, but inside, a line had been drawn. A wide, irreversible one. Lydia had made her choice, and I had finally made mine, and I was beginning to understand that maybe this was what taking your power back actually looked like. It was nearly 7 when the knock came. Not the doorbell Lydia would have rung. This was sharp, impatient knuckles on wood. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door. Mark stood there in his button-down shirt and gray slacks, looking like he'd come straight from the office. His tie was loosened, but his jaw was tight. Why aren't you answering your phone? He asked, stepping inside before I invited him. Hello to you too, I said calmly, closing the door behind him. He turned to face me in the hallway, his expression already set for confrontation. Lydia's freaking out. She says you canceled the payment. Is that true? I walked past him into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. Yes, Mark followed, hovering. Mom, you can't just, I can, I said simply, and I did. He rubbed a hand through his hair just like his father used to when he was cornered. This isn't like you. No, it's not. I sipped the water. But maybe that's the problem. Maybe I've spent too many years being predictable. She said you agreed to watch online. I said no such thing. She informed me of her decision. Mark opened his mouth, closed it, then quieter. You know, Luke's parents are covering most of it, right? I set the glass down, the sound sharp on the counter. Is that so? Because I've already given her $28,000, and there was 45 more on the way until she decided I was unfit to be present. He went still. Jesus, Mom, I didn't know it was that much. No, I said you didn't, because no one asked. They just assumed I'd keep giving no matter how they treated me. And then I said the thing I hadn't allowed myself to feel before. But I'm done being taken for granted. The next day, just as the sun began to dip behind the treetops, there was another knock at my door. This time it was softer, hesitant. When I opened it, Claire Robbins stood there. Lydia's childhood best friend, the one who used to spend entire weekends at our house, eating frozen pizza and watching Disney movies on VHS. She smiled nervously, clutching her coat. Hi, Mrs. Whitaker. I hope this isn't a bad time. It's never a great time for unexpected visits, I said, but I stepped aside and let her in. She looked around the living room like it hadn't changed in 20 years, and it really hadn't. Same couch, same bookshelf Lydia helped me build when she was 12. Claire sat on the edge of the armchair, back straight, hands folded. I wanted to talk to you. Lydia doesn't know I'm here. I leaned against the doorway. Then say what you came to say. She's a mess, Claire blurted. She's barely sleeping. The venue's calling nonstop, the planners threatening to back out. Luke's mom is furious. It's bad. I waited. Claire shifted. Look, I know what she did was awful, and I don't blame you for being upset. I'd be devastated. But is this really how you want things to be between you two? Is there no way back from this? I walked over to the small table beside the couch and picked up a framed photo. Lydia and Claire, both 17, dressed for prom. I held it out toward her. Tell me, Claire, if that were your mom, would you be okay watching the biggest moment of your life without her there? Would you ask her to accept that without question? Claire looked down, unable to answer. I set the photo back. Then I think you know why I did what I did. The office was unusually quiet the next morning. Fridays often carried that hush. Half the architects worked remotely, and even the copy machine seemed to hum more gently. Michael Brenner stopped by my desk just after 10. He carried 2 paper cups from the cafe down the street, the kind with the recycled sleeves. I figured you could use a second cup today, he said, setting one down. I smiled faintly. You always know. He didn't leave right away, just stood there watching me like he was waiting for something more than a thank you. After a beat, I said, My daughter's getting married in France. I paid for most of it. He nodded slowly, giving me space. She sent me an email this week, I continued, telling me I should watch the ceremony online, live stream it, because apparently my presence complicates things. Michael didn't flinch. He just pulled over the spare chair and sat beside me, coffee untouched. And you canceled the rest of the money, he said gently. I looked at him. How did you? You're here today. Calm. Not broken. That's not the woman I know when she's been stepped on. That's someone who's decided something. I didn't speak for a moment. Then I said, It's not about the money. Not really. It's about what the money represented. Being needed, but never wanted. Being useful, but never valued. He nodded again, this time slower. I'm tired, Michael. Tired of being invisible. He leaned back, exhaling like he'd been holding breath for me. You're not invisible. Not to me. His voice was quiet, but solid, and for some reason, it was that line, not Lydia's email, not Mark's argument, that nearly made me cry. Saturday morning arrived with gray clouds and an ache behind my eyes. I wasn't surprised I'd barely slept, not from guilt, but from the weight of it all. Silence has a way of pressing in on you once you've chosen it. I was sipping coffee on the back porch when my phone vibrated with a notification. Facebook. Lydia Whitaker has posted an update. It took me a minute to open it. Part of me didn't want to know. But curiosity, like pain, has its own momentum. The post began with a tone of heartbreak. To everyone who's been asking about wedding updates, sadly we're facing some unexpected obstacles. My mother, who had promised to support the event, has pulled out just days before the ceremony. I'm devastated. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most end up hurting you in ways no stranger ever could. Underneath were dozens of comments. I'm so sorry, Lydia. That's horrible. A mother should always support her child's happiness. Unbelievable. Some people just can't let go of control. I scrolled, silently watching the verdict roll in. No trial, no cross-examination, just the sentence guilty. But then further down, a different voice. Wait. She pulled her funding, but wasn't even invited to attend in person. That doesn't sound right. No likes, no replies. Just that one small crack in the narrative. I set my phone down. I didn't cry. I didn't write a rebuttal or message Lydia in anger. I just sat there watching the morning light struggle to break through the clouds. It was a strange kind of peace being painted the villain by your own child. Because once you've been made the enemy, there's nothing left to lose. Only what you choose to keep. It was early evening when I saw a car pull into my driveway, a sleek black sedan I didn't recognize right away. The engine idled for a few seconds before shutting off. I stood behind the curtain, not moving, watching. Then he stepped out, Marcel. I didn't open the door immediately. I made him knock. When I did, he looked startled, like he hadn't expected I'd actually answer. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, his French accent heavier than I remembered. May I speak with you? I said nothing, just stepped aside. He walked in slow and stiff, like someone bracing for a storm that had already started. I gestured toward the couch, but stayed standing. I want to apologize, he began, and explain if you'll let me. Go ahead, I said flatly. The email you received? Lydia didn't write it. My spine straightened. Excuse me, I did. She asked me to handle it. She couldn't bring herself to say it. I took a long breath through my nose. So you were the messenger? He nodded. But it wasn't just me. My mother? She was insistent. She believed your presence would overshadow the ceremony. She said too much American influence would disrespect our traditions. I nearly laughed. And Lydia agreed. He hesitated. She didn't fight it. Of course she didn't. He leaned forward, hands clasped. I know it was wrong, all of it. I should have stopped it. I didn't. No, you didn't, I echoed. And now what you've come to undo it. He shook his head slowly. I came to own it. I studied his face, handsome but weary, younger than I remembered, and somehow more human. You're not the villain here, I said finally. But you're not the victim either. He nodded. I understand. But I wasn't sure he did. Sunday afternoon brought rain and someone from a past life. I was sorting laundry when I heard a car door slam, two quick thuds like punctuation. Through the front window, I saw the familiar green BMW Dean. My ex-husband hadn't been to this house since the ink dried on our divorce papers 17 years ago. He looked older, heavier around the middle, still wearing the same smug expression that used to drive me mad. I didn't open the door until his second knock. Elaine, he said like it was still 1998. Dean, you look, well, he offered. I do, I replied, stepping aside, which makes me wonder why you're here. He followed me into the kitchen, dripping water from his jacket sleeves. I handed him a towel without warmth. I talked to Lydia, he started. She's a wreck. Says you're punishing her over some misunderstanding. I set a mug on the counter without looking at him. Is that what she called it? I just think, maybe this whole thing's gotten out of hand. She's your daughter. Don't ruin the biggest day of her life over pride. That word pride hit harder than he knew. I turned to him. Did she also mention that she uninvited me? That I was told to stay home and watch my own daughter's wedding like it was a YouTube clip? He paused. She said you were still included, just virtually. I stared at him, incredulous. You left me for a dental hygienist named Coral. Do not stand in my kitchen and talk to me about what being included means. His face flushed. That was different. No, I said. Back then I had no choice, but now I do. And I'm choosing not to be treated like a checkbook with a name. Dean looked down for once without a comeback, and I realized that silence can be an apology too. She showed up after dark. I had just sat down with a bowl of leftover soup when headlights flared across the window and a car door slammed harder than necessary. I knew it was her even before I opened the door. Lydia stood on my porch, soaked from the rain, hair plastered to her cheeks, mascara smeared in a way I hadn't seen since high school. She didn't wait to be invited in. You turned Dad against me, she snapped the moment she crossed the threshold. No, I said, shutting the door behind her. I simply told him the truth. Something you've had trouble doing lately. She dropped her bag by the couch and folded her arms like a child sent to detention. This is insane. Everything's falling apart and you're just, what, sitting here eating soup like it's nothing? I gestured toward the second chair. You're welcome to sit. Yelling won't help. She didn't sit. Do you even care? Do you know how humiliating this has been? Luke's parents are threatening to cancel the whole thing. Mark's furious. And Dad, he actually took your side. I stared at her. You're angry that people are finally seeing things clearly. She hesitated. I made a mistake. Okay, I panicked. I wanted everything to go smoothly. Luke's family was already judging me. So you cut me out, I said, because I was the easy one to silence. She didn't deny it. What do you want from me, Lydia? I asked, voice steady. She paused, then almost whispering, I want you to fix it, like you always do. I looked at her, my daughter grown and undone, and I felt the sorrow of it all settle in my bones. I can't fix this, I said gently, and I won't. Her breath caught. You're really going to let my wedding fall apart? No, I said. You did that when you chose convenience over respect. Her lips trembled. So what happens now? I stood. Not to threaten, not to console, just to be eye level with her when I said it. Now, we both live with what we've chosen. The house was quiet after she left, not the kind of silence that screams or presses in from the corners, but something steadier, like a deep exhale after holding your breath for too long. I stood in the living room for a while, staring at the spot where Lydia had stood just moments before. Her eyes wet, her arms crossed like armor. I used to think I could fix anything if I just tried hard enough, if I gave enough, if I stayed quiet long enough. But that night, I realized silence can be a boundary, and I had every right to claim it. I didn't check my phone. I didn't call Mark or Michael or anyone else. Instead, I gathered the dishes from the table, loaded the dishwasher, and wiped the counters down like I had done every night for the past 20 years. Except this time, I did it for myself, not because someone else was coming or expecting or needing. Later, I sat at my computer and opened a tab I hadn't clicked in years, my personal travel account. Points and miles quietly accumulated over time, waited like unopened letters. I typed in Venice. 3 minutes later, I booked a flight for mid-May. It was a city I had dreamed of visiting since I was young, before I ever became Mom or Mrs. Whitaker or administrative manager floor 3. I didn't know what I'd find there. Maybe just bridges and espresso and strangers who didn't know my name. But that sounded like a start. Before bed, I texted Michael. Would you like to get dinner next weekend? No agenda, just Dinner. The reply came quickly. Yes. I'd like that very much. I plugged in my phone to charge, turned out the lights and climbed into bed alone, whole and strangely at peace. Mark called the following Wednesday. I was standing in the driveway clipping back the lavender bushes before the late spring sun had a chance to scorch them. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and when I saw his name, I hesitated. But this time I answered. Hey, Mom, he said, voice quieter than usual. I talked to Lydia. I didn't say anything, just waited. She told me everything. About the email, Marcel, the live stream, all of it. Still, I stayed silent. I guess I kept hoping it was a misunderstanding, that you were overreacting, that she didn't really mean to shut you out like that. He exhaled on the other end. But I was wrong. There was something in his voice, heavier, more measured, like he was trying not to trip over his own complicity. I'm sorry, Mom, for not backing you up, for not seeing it sooner. I wiped my palms on my gardening apron, the clippings at my feet still fragrant. I know you're angry, he continued, and you have every right to be. But I hope you know it wasn't all for nothing. You made a point. A big one. Finally, I spoke. It wasn't about making a point, Mark. It was about making a boundary. He went quiet. Then, so where do we go from here? I looked at the row of lavender half-trimmed and still wild on one side. There was no dramatic answer, just life, steady and slow, continuing forward. You and Lydia will figure yourselves out, I said. I'm not standing in the middle anymore. And us? He asked. I smiled faintly. You know where to find me. But don't come looking for the mother who never says no. He let out a quiet laugh, more honest than I expected. Okay, that's fair. We said goodbye and I slid the phone back into my pocket. Then I knelt, clipped the next stalk, and moved on to the rest.